Some say cosm. Do you hear our prayers?
This is a rotten way to end it.
This is not the ending. You haven't read it yet.
Plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy. The cosmos, of course. Let us sit about and speak feverishly, chatting into the wee hours of new ideas of the higher plane.
This is not reality!
It's all happening for real, Trent. And it is all in that book, and that's how I know.
We should not abandon the dream.
This will drive you absolutely mad.
No one can catch us. No one can stop us now.
I am creating this video under appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I can carry this knowledge no longer. When you have watched this unfathomable analysis, you may guess, though never fully realise, why it is I must relay this information to you. It is bound to shock you, to frighten you, to drive you to insanity. What I speak of are the works of H.P. Lovecraft. Heralded by academic Michael Saylor as among the most important figures of supernatural world-building, Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos has expanded into film, video games, and even small plush toys. The director, Guillermo del Toro, borrows heavily from Lovecraft's descriptions to create his own fantasy creations, which has led leading Lovecraft essayist and author S.T. Joshi to describe del Toro as Lovecraft's closest analogue for the modern day. Yet where Joshi's praise becomes ill-founded is del Toro's lack of focus on traditional Lovecraft themes, no less the portrayal of Lovecraftian insanity. As the driving force of other themes in Lovecraft's work, insanity leads many studious protagonists to their ultimate downfall, usually at the hands of a cosmic realization. As I relay my eldritch argument to you, you may think me mad, yet I assure you that what I speak of is backed up with well-researched evidence. As Kevin Wetmore notes, where del Toro differs from Lovecraft is that del Toro attempts to personalize his work through the lens of a Lovecraftian horror.
Obviously, monsters are living, breathing metaphors that for me, half of the fun is explaining them socially, biologically, mythologically, and so forth.
Del Toro's failed attempt of adapting Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness would have seen the setting moved from 20th century Antarctica to 16th century Mexico, invoking the history of his native homeland. Allow me to pose, therefore, that films such as Hellboy are Lovecraft-inspired. They borrow from the aesthetic style of Lovecraft, yet they decide to explore themes outside of what Lovecraft would traditionally have addressed. For instance, what would Lovecraft think of del Toro's latest work, The Shape of Water, which concerns a human falling in love with a deity from the deep, designed to look exactly like a deep one? A Lovecraft adaptation, on the other hand, seeks to adapt themes of insanity and despair into a new medium that brings Lovecraft to the modern day. This video essay will showcase two examples of Lovecraftian adaptations, John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness and From Software's Bloodborne, and explain how they have translated Lovecraftian madness to their respective presentations, and how such an inclusion was received by the general public at large. In 1995, John Carpenter was becoming a name of the past, with huge CGI blockbusters and cheap horror franchise sequels littering the market. Carpenter's prosthetic-heavy horror style was becoming stale. In the Mouth of Madness was Carpenter's attempt at adapting Lovecraft to the big screen.
I've always wanted to tackle H.P. Lovecraft. I've always wanted to do something with him. It's very hard because he describes indescribable horror. I mean, what is it? What does it look like? It drives people mad when they see it. So if you visualize too much of it, I think it may lose its punch.
Carpenter evidently understood that Lovecraft's themes of indescribable horror and madness were key to a faithful adaptation, hence why much of the film is focused on the decline of John Trent's sanity.
You want to hear about my them, don't you?
The film depicts descending into madness through many formal techniques, such as surreal dream sequences, set changes taking place during the same take, and a fascination of filming characters sleeping to distort the difference between fiction and reality. Carpenter also heavily edited the film.
We did a lot of editing work on it because its impact needed to come in very strange places. We used a lot of flash frames and quick cutting and such to I don't know, express anxiety and horror.
The constant editing makes In the Mouth of Madness very hard to follow. The film's seemingly simple narrative at the beginning becomes totally incomprehensible by the end, mirroring Trent's descent into insanity and implanting such a feeling onto the audience. Another visual technique Carpenter uses to depict descending into madness is the lighting on Trent's face. At the beginning of the film, where Trent is oozing with confidence, the lighting is turned up to an unnatural degree, highlighting Trent's supposed sanity. As strange dreams begin clouding Trent's mind,
Do you want some too, buddy?
the lighting is toned down, but still manages to capture Trent's face enough to showcase his grasp on the situation.
But regardless of what you saw, regardless of what you think, we are not living inside a Sutter Kane story.
After night falls and events start getting even stranger for Trent, only one side of his face is lit.
We are not living in a Sutter Kane story. This is not reality.
And after he learns that he's simply a character in Kane's new novel,
You are what I write.
Trent stares into a black abyss of truth, that he is just a pawn in a bigger game, and ultimately the lighting directly on his face is fully diminished.
He began to back away from the rip as the army of unspeakable figures, twilit by the glow from the bottomless pit, came pouring at him toward our world.
In the Mouth of Madness evidently uses its unique aspect as a film to portray Lovecraftian madness on screen. Yet how was this approach to horror received in 1995? The film had a mixed response, with focus directed on Carpenter himself rather than the film. Carpenter's baggage as a cheesy B-movie horror director seemed to cloud critics' minds, focusing on how In the Mouth of Madness lacked familiarity with the previous work that John Carpenter had done, like Halloween or Escape from New York.
This idea could have been turned into a wicked social satire, but instead the movie goes for ghouls and hallucinations and lots of shots of things that jump out at you from the edge of the screen, which is another tire cliche. It's too bad.
I feel a mixture of Carpenter's name attached to the film and the move to CGI filmmaking in the mid-1990s was the main reason why In the Mouth of Madness failed at the box office. Some critics, such as Janet Masling for instance at the New York Times, did see the underlying complexity of the film, noting how it parodies bestsellerdom and best-selling authors. From critical responses it can be deduced that this style of psychological horror was not popular, with critics such as Ebert used to viewing jump scare films such as Scream and the countless Halloween sequels. Horror as a genre was waning in respect and popularity, with many audience goers preferring to see the lighter comedy of Billy Madison in that same week. Whilst In the Mouth of Madness achieved replicating Lovecraftian insanity on screen, this incredible feat was lost in translation and forgotten in the public eye.
This is not a Sutter Kane story. This is not reality. Not reality. Not reality.
Nearly 20 years after In the Mouth of Madness released, a Japanese games development company, From Software, released Bloodborne in 2015. Bloodborne was promoted as a Bram Stoker-inspired Monster Hunter game, with the player assuming the role of a hunter to stop a beastly scourge. Yet as the game progresses, eldritch horrors begin manifesting around you, and higher beings from the cosmos are actually the true antagonists of the game. The design of the game invokes a direct interpretation of fantasy that Lovecraft held. In a selected letter he said, My conception of fantasy as a genuine art form is an extension rather than a negation of reality. Ordinary tales about a castle ghost or old-fashioned werewolves are merely so much junk. In keeping with that quote, once the cosmetic horrors enter Bloodborne, it becomes clear that the spooky werewolves at the beginning of the game were just a mockery for the real-world horror the game has in store. The visual horror is complemented by direct Lovecraftian influence in its gameplay mechanics. From Software aimed to capture the fear of the unknown directly through insight and frenzy. Insight, represented by the eye symbol on screen, is a score depicting how many secrets you can see around the world. When high, the player can see all manner of horrors. When low, the player is none the wiser. Insight is gained by consuming Madman's knowledge or Great One's wisdom, clearly linking high insight and madness together. The amount of insight you have can change the world around you. Cause you to hear harrowing baby cries that hint the true nature of the plot. The more insightful of you would have noticed the change in background music over the course of this video, which directly comes from the game. As with Lovecraft's previous protagonists, the goal of the game is to discover unspeakable truths about the world unseen by most, which gives you more insight into the real plot of the game. Madness is represented by the frenzy meter, an ailment caused by witnessing particularly nasty creatures. When frenzy fills up, it removes 80% of your health, causing panic or death. When low on insight, your frenzy resistance is strong, allowing ignorant minds to resist death by madness. When insight is high, your frenzy resistance is incredibly low, causing enlightened characters to die very quickly. Insight and frenzy marry together to create a subtle game mechanic to make the game harder for those who inquire about their role in the world. Due to Bloodborne's unique aspect as a game, it is you, not a character, who must choose how enlightened you become. Will you blissfully complete Bloodborne without knowing the backstory? Or fully commit to Madman's knowledge at the cost of your lives? In complete contrast to In the Mouth of Madness, Bloodborne was both a critical and commercial success, winning numerous Game of the Year awards, along with still holding the rank of 7th best-selling PlayStation 4 game of all time. However, like In the Mouth of Madness, initial reviews did not detail its Lovecraftian influence. Outlets like IGN and GameSpot felt that the allegories to religion in the game were more noticeable.
Only now has developer From Software allowed an extravagant religious parable to mirror its death and resurrection mechanics.
You could find a subtext of criticisms on real-world concepts like faith and worship, but taking each outrageously odd story point at face value is the much more enjoyable path.
It's only been over the last few years that gamers have returned to Bloodborne to appreciate its Lovecraftian lore. While Bloodborne did so well commercially and critically, its marketing and response evidently did not focus on the Lovecraftian themes it adapted, meaning that like In the Mouth of Madness, its inclusion of insanity didn't sell the game. Ultimately, it has become clear that Lovecraftian Madness was uniquely adapted into both Bloodborne and In the Mouth of Madness. Carpenter's film used editing and a non-linear narrative to replicate the sensations of descending into insanity, whilst Bloodborne subtly injects madness as a game mechanic that becomes more potent as the game progresses. These texts take the theme of insanity and implant them into their very structure. Yet critically, it took a long time for anyone to notice. In the Mouth of Madness was released during a horror franchise heavy season, and along with a declining opinion of John Carpenter's quality, ultimately failed to reach its budget of $8 million. The film did have a good performance at rental markets, and like most of Carpenter's films, became a cult favourite. Bloodborne, on the other hand, broke into the mainstream, yet it did not get recognition for its adaptation of Lovecraftian insanity until much later. What these two texts show is that while Lovecraftian insanity can be creative and unique, it doesn't guarantee financial or critical success. In conclusion, perhaps one day Del Toro can make At the Mountains of Madness a reality, and introduce Lovecraftian themes to a wider audience. But for now, the old ones still sleep, waiting for another chance to enter the spotlight, and madness remains a mystery, only for those inquisitive enough to discover.